Hello everyone and welcome back to Soul RN. My name is Meg and I'm going to be talking about an ethical dilemma concerning a woman named Marlise Munoz from Texas. For disclaimer before we get started, I am not releasing any medical information that was not already released to the public. I am not giving any medical advice and I am not passing any judgment on anyone's personal decision. I'm just bringing up an ethical concern and we're just going to talk about it. So Marlise Munoz was born August 20th, 1980, and she was married to a man named Eric, and they already had one son and they were expecting their second. And this happened in November of 2013. Her husband came home and found her unconscious on the floor. So she was rushed to a local hospital and they pronounced her brain dead from a suspected pulmonary embolism. I didn't see any other of her medical history or any of her information about this visit, so I don't necessarily know what happened. I assume that there were some more complications that arose from the PE, which then caused her to become unconscious and lose oxygen to her brain, which then caused the brain death. So brain death, by definition, is just when there's no brain activity and you cannot sustain life. So she was known to be pregnant. She was about 14 weeks pregnant at this time. And so her and her husband Eric were both paramedics. So they had discussed, what would happen if situations previously. So they had discussed that neither of them would want to be on life support if something were to happen and they were, declared dead. They didn't want to be stuck on a ventilator and, all the things that go along with that. So when she was declared brain dead, her husband said, "This is not what she wanted. I want her to be removed." Well, in Texas, the law is that your advance directives are null and void if you are pregnant. And this is not just Texas. There's many states that have this law. It was enacted in the early 90s in Texas. Even if you say, "I don't want to be on a ventilator and it's my body," if you're pregnant, you have to be an incubator for that baby. And with the baby only being 14 weeks, there would be no way that the fetus would survive outside of the womb. So they couldn't just deliver the baby and hope for the best, the fetus wouldn't survive at this point. So the husband ended up having to take this to court because the hospital refused to remove her from life support. Lots of tests were done on the fetus. They weren't even able to determine a gender because the fetus wasn't developed enough yet to see that. And during the other testing, they found that the baby had hydrocephalus, which is where there's a collection of water around the brain, which causes damage and can have some debilitating side effects after birth. And also there was mention of a possible heart condition. And there was also no way of knowing how much oxygen the fetus got while she was unconscious. The fetus still had a heartbeat, but they really didn't know what was going to happen if she were to be carrying the fetus to full term and then deliver, what kind of quality of life the baby would have after. And the husband realized this and chose not to continue the pregnancy. So he had to go to court for a few weeks and fight this with the hospital, and eventually a judge did hand down a ruling that she will be taken off life support. And there was a vigil for the mother and the fetus afterwards, and there was a lot of people that were upset that this happened, that they didn't feel like the fetus had a chance at life because of what happened. But there's the ethical question of, this is the mother's choice, this is the mother's body. She didn't want to be an incubator for her baby after she was already legally dead. Who has a stronger pull at this point, the person who has already technically dead or the person who may have a chance at life but not for many more weeks? She wasn't able to be taken off life support until the fetus was at 23 weeks, which is still not a viable progression of the gestation. So there's lots of risks also that come along with just having a pretty much incubator body for a fetus. that, the mother's not, alive technically, you know. Along with the other associated risks of just being on a ventilator in general, like pneumonia and all the other things, you can get lots of infections because your body's not functioning like it normally would be. So you're at high risk for infection, hemodynamic instabilities where your blood pressure can go up and down and be unstable. If a mother's blood pressure is too high during her pregnancy, she's usually admitted and monitored because it's very dangerous for the fetus when the mother's blood pressure is very high. She could go into, metabolic acidosis, respiratory acidosis because of the ventilator. Her body's not working the way it normally would, so lots of things can go wrong. She can develop a condition where she just starts bleeding and clotting for literally no reason, and you just have to try to treat it and hope for the best because it's just something that happens. And at 23 weeks, there's a very, very low risk chance that the fetus would survive. So a little bit of research I did showed that at 32 weeks, if the mother is brain dead, there's about an 80% chance that the fetus would survive at 32 weeks. And at 28 weeks, there's only a 30% chance that the fetus would survive. And this was 23 weeks, which is barely viable in a very, healthy mother who had to deliver early for whatever reason. And, lots of life-saving measures are done on the fetus so that it would survive, but it's a very slim chance at 23 weeks, even in a normal situation. Texas is known for not having, very liberal ideas. And so I think that if this had happened in a different state that didn't have the rule that your advance directives don't count if you're pregnant, I think the outcome would have been a lot different. And eventually Eric did get what he, wanted for his wife, and they were able to cremate her after, along with the fetus. They ended up naming the fetus Nicole. That was Marlise's middle name. This is a ethical dilemma for obvious reasons, and also because this is just my opinion. This is not medical advice. I don't think that the law really should have any say in what you do with your own self. Like, there's no rule that you have to have chemo treatment if you have cancer. It just depends on their rules and their perspectives and their political agenda, because there's always a political agenda when it comes to uteruses. Eric still has his other child, and so they will carry on her legacy, and hopefully things that happen like this that are sad and traumatic for the family and for the people who are around them and for the medical staff, because I'm sure there was a lot of medical staff that were against this, but they had to still take care of her, even though if they didn't think it was right that she was on ventilation. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, if you think that she should have been taken off before, or she should have stayed on and tried to see what happened to the fetus Nicole and go from there. And I appreciate you watching. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, and go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Bye.